Bridge Forward here. They're going to be coming out with even more information on Project Forward, but this is the first and longest thing they've really done on it. They've mentioned Forward briefly in their meetings that I've gone to, and they've mentioned it briefly in like smart briefs and the monthly recap buzz letters, but this is like a big sort of explanation. About Project Forward. An attack on DEI is an attack on innovation and business growth. Led by Bridge, Project Forward is a cross-industry initiative designed to chart our collective path forward and meet the current moment head-on. In partnership with top experts in academia, law, and our board members, we are dedicated to equipping, educating, and empowering leaders in diversity, equity, and inclusion, marketing, and business to continue to drive inclusive innovation and sustainable growth. And in this last meeting where the McCormick HR guy came to speak as well, Sheryl Daija was incredibly interested in having one-on-one talks with him on how to spearhead more of these initiatives as well. So I don't know if we're going to get, like we did with Cisco or like we did with ELF, any of the like information from when they talk privately. We'll have to see. Every Friday, we intend for Project Forward to provide critical updates on executive orders and legislative developments, featuring legal interpretations from Stacey Hawkins, Esquire, diversity and employment practices consultant and Rutgers professor of law, as well as Jessica Golden Cortez, partner labor and employment group, Davis and Gilbert, LLP. We'll also provide the Bridge point of view and tangible actions to consider. Read on for the expert assessment that will help you navigate this evolving landscape. Asterisk, these Project Forward updates should not be construed as legal advice or counsel. They are for educational and instructive purposes only, to aid our understanding about how best to actively continue our mission in response to this moment. I like how you always have to put that whenever you talk, like, as a legal professional. Like, I can't have people misconstrue it. How nice of her to list people who should be arrested. Absolutely. Absolutely. Executive Order 14151. On January 20th and 21st, 2025, Trump issued a series of executive orders that attempt to curtail workplace DEI efforts across the federal workforce. And this is the executive order ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. Legal interpretation. These executive orders directives dismantle the DEI efforts in the federal workforce, established under previous administrations by mandating the following actions. Eliminate all federal offices, positions, programs, policies, and practices that involve or in any way support DEI. Terminate all federal contracts for DEI-related services. Remove any considerations of race, sex, religion, or equity from federal recruitment, hiring, or performance management processes. The Bridge point of view says, many confusing headlines insinuate incorrect conclusions that private employers' DEI practices are unlawful or have to be dismantled. That is not the case. This moment, calls for a thoughtful and pragmatic approach which should likely include a review of your current DEI practices, in consultation with legal counsel to ensure your DEI practices are within the confines of long-standing federal, state, and local anti-discrimination laws. This is what I've been saying. Every time someone has come in and been like, Trump has signed the executive orders, DEI is over, DEI is completely gone, man, like we've won. It's like, well, now hold your horses there, little Jimmy. It's amazing that Trump has signed these. It's great that him and Elon are going to be rooting out DEI in the federal sector. But that has nothing to do with the private sector. These companies like Bridge and these companies that we've talked about, unless they have contracts with the federal government, they're not beholden to anything in this executive order, right? This is all at the federal level. So again, like the Cisco guy here, he's playing with fucking fire because Cisco has contracts with the government. But places like Johnson & Johnson or Condé Nast or Sephora or any of these other companies, Campbell's Soup, any of these companies working with Bridge, they do not have to dismantle jack shit. They can just tell you they're dismantling things. They can tell you that they're stopping their public reporting, but they are not beholden to the executive orders, which is where we come in, and we still have work to do in the private sector and bringing these companies to the attention of DOJ and of the administration if they have federal contracts, again, like Cisco. Executive orders are not enacted laws. Also true. Also true. This moment calls for a thoughtful and pragmatic approach, which should likely include a review of your current DEI practices, in consultation with legal counsel, to ensure your DEI practices are within the confines of the long-standing federal, state, and local anti-discrimination laws. Now, they say that you should consult with legal counsel. And if they have lawyers, like they set up here, if they have like Stacey Hawkins and Jessica Cortez here, if they have these lawyers that are going to help companies read this legal language from the lawsuits that have been pushed and from affirmative action being removed, if they're going to have this legal counsel help them word things to keep pushing DEI, even under different names, even as a way to like subvert it from being noticed, they're going to be in a decently powerful position to still do things that should be illegal, but they've loopholed themselves into a way where they're not going to get in trouble for it. Which is, again, where we come in, talking about it, noticing it, bringing it to the attention of people who can tangibly go after these companies for it happening. Speaking of Doge, did I see Jon Stewart had a full-blown meltdown? I did not. I don't watch anything that man does. Cisco CEO Chuck Robbins put it best. DEI is being discussed like it's a single-issue discussion, and you either believe it or you don't. And in reality, it's made up of 150 different things. Maybe 7 of them got a little out of hand. I think those 6 or 7 things are going to get solved, and then the core reasons that you have a diverse workforce are still there from a business perspective. Executive Order 14168. The order is defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government. Legal interpretation is this executive order is directed specifically towards efforts designed to recognize, respect, and protect the rights and dignities of LGBTQ+ persons. That's a very interesting way to phrase it from the legal people Bridge is talking to, right? That's a very interesting way to say that in order for trans people to have rights, women need to fuck off. It instructs federal agencies to recognize only 2 sexes, male and female, and to eliminate language, references, and practices across the federal government, both internal to the workforce and in external public services functions that acknowledge or refer to gender identity, gender expression, the existence of transgender, gender nonconforming, or non-binary persons, mandating that sex-based accommodations and anti-discrimination laws be interpreted solely according to the immutable biological reality of sex, and in a manner that expressly rejects any internal, fluid, or subjective sense of self unmoored from biological facts. Which is great. I love that. I love that they're doing that. This is what I voted for. Although this executive order cannot eliminate the protections for LGBTQ+ persons recognized by the Supreme Court in 2020 as existing under Title VII and preventing employment discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, it may reduce other protections for LGBTQ+ individuals within the federal workforce, such as access to gender-neutral bathrooms, preferred pronouns, or gender-congruent identity markers, and in federal public services like forms requiring gender identification. All right, so first of all, I like how they're calling these protections now instead of rights because they realized no one has the right to fucking preferred pronouns or gender congruent identity markers. That's not a right, man. So now they're being called protections. And also I saw the army was basically like, yeah, all transgender people get the fuck out. If you've ever had hormones, if you've ever had surgeries, if you've ever had a dysphoria diagnosis, get the fuck out. Making the army a bit more reasonable again. Wish their parents had used protection. What the fuck is gender congruent? So it's like, if you want to change on your birth certificate, like you are a biological male, and you want to change on your birth certificate to that male to female, that is allowed in quite a few states. So that would be a gender congruent identity marker. Although this order will alter how the federal government enforces sex-based anti-discrimination law by significantly narrowing the accommodation and non-discrimination obligations under these laws for LGBTQ+ persons, the order does not require non-federal entities to abandon any policies or practices that provide these accommodations or require non-discrimination for the LGBTQ+ community. So once again, they're saying, you know, basically what I've been reading from the articles in the Smart Brief for the last several months anyways. They're just writing it in plain language from a lawyer, saying that yes, while these protections are going to be rolled back for federal employees, which is bad in these people's opinion, If you are a private entity, if you are not working with the federal government, you do not have to abide by this. You can keep offering the same protections that you always have to these people, and you don't have to change anything. The Bridge point of view, so how Bridge is telling people to interpret the executive order and the legal advice. Bridge contends that enforcing a narrow, biologically fixed view of gender is not only an attack on nuanced, equitable policy, but also a strategy to weaponize women's and children's rights under the guise of protection. Bro, nobody is attacking grown men with fetishes on the basis of trying to protect women. Women, like, no woman feels like their rights are being weaponized in order to protect them in their own sports and changing rooms and bathrooms. Like, this, that is an absolute wild statement to make, dude. These people are nuts. They say protections, but they really mean privileges. Oh yeah, we know what they mean by protections. They originally called them rights because that was an easy way to fool normies into believing that, oh, transgender people's rights are under attack, but it's like, you don't have the right to mutilate children. You don't have the right to force people to have sex with you. You don't have the right to force taxpayers to pay for your cosmetic surgeries, right? Like, those are not rights. Yes, you've weaponized these victims to pursue a legal case against this criminal type logic. No, it's like, if women have to pay out of pocket for their cosmetic boob jobs, then the fetishistic males also should. And they don't have the right to force us to indulge in their delusions. Absolutely. That people get arrested for misgendering is just simply insane, as it were. And we're gonna talk about the fucking Worcester freaks again as well, because Amaranth got in trouble for looking at the Worcester Freaks video. She was looking at my state. How dare she? When are we going to care about white hetero men? Well, you're in luck, because these crazy acolytes say that now is the time. They were too exclusionary towards white cis men for too long, and that got them too much pushback. So if they want to continue pushing their ideology, they have to make more cis hetero white men feel like they're included in the actual inclusion. Even if you think that they shouldn't be there or they don't belong there, you should still use language that helps them feel included so that they learn to accept your ideology and they help you perpetrate it. This approach is an orchestrated effort to roll back inclusion, erasing hard-fought protections for transgender, non-binary, and gender-expansive people. All right, well, first of all, transgender people, very small percentage of the population. Most people who are hard fighting for these hard protections are actually just fetishistic men and ideologues wanting privileges and a way to completely shut down their opposition without having to try. Non-binary people, that's not real. Non-binary is not a real thing. That is not a real sex. You cannot, like, that's not real. That is just like a teen girl who wants attention. And gender expansive is just like the new word for fat people. Like I don't identify as obese. I'm gender expansive, actually. Like, what does that even mean? Pop off, queen! Critical actions we can take in the workplace: reaffirm commitment to inclusive policies that explicitly protect employees of all gender identities. Review HR policies to ensure workplace protections for transgender employees remain intact, and continue to educate employee population on these policies and practices. And third, support employee resource groups focused on LGBTQ+ inclusion and gender equity. And again, a lot of these employee resource groups have come under fire for being exclusive because, by definition, they are. So a lot of places are starting to say, like, yeah, we have like a Black and Indigenous resource group, we have an LGBTQ+ resource group, but you can apply to be in these even if you're not Black and Indigenous or LGBTQ. Are they going to accept you into them? The answer is absolutely not. But because they say that they're going to include you, that's all that matters, because you can't prove that they're being exclusive just because they didn't let you in. Why does it sound like they just want segregation again? Because that's what they've been advocating for since like 2013, my guy. And that really kicked off when the Black Lives Matter founders were like, yeah, we're trained Marxists, and basically explained how they want separation, segregation, and reparation. Your employer does that, it's cringe. You're included if you aren't in the group, but it's not like it helps you at all. For more context, see Sheryl Daija's commentary, weaponizing are being used to advance discriminatory practices. That's very strange English. I don't know what she means by this, but let's see what her little post here says. Oh, it's a LinkedIn post. Weaponizing protection, how women's rights and child safety are being used to advance discriminatory policies. Well, this was on the 18th, so this was recently as well. This was a very recent post by Sheryl. Interesting. When protection is a pretext for exclusion. Across government policies, a disturbing pattern is unfolding. Diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are being dismantled, and in the latest unconstitutional overreach, discriminatory measures targeting gender identity are being rebranded as efforts to safeguard women's rights and child safety. Hold on a fucking second. Hold on, I gotta bring up a Sargon tweet for this. I don't know where he got this from, but he has like a little screenshot here of like an off-center text message. I have no idea where he found this. But it says, if you oppose DEI, you should have to use the full phrase instead of the letters. Be brave and say, I oppose diversity, equity, and inclusion. Bonus points if you admit which part of that you don't like. Making it an acronym transforms it into a thought-terminating cliche. From now on, be proud of your opinions, but be specific. Let everyone know if it's diversity you don't like, or if it's equity, or if it's being inclusive. And in the bridge meeting yesterday, this is exactly what Sheryl Daija wanted people to do as well. She said using DEI as an acronym takes the seriousness out of it. If somebody says that they oppose DEI, your response should be, what are you actually opposing? You want to force them into saying that they oppose diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they do this, again, this is the same exact thing as when people say they oppose Black Lives Matter. They can be shut down by being called a racist because, again, it's subversive language. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean what they're using it as. It is a cudgel to advance Marxism. It doesn't actually care about Black lives. It doesn't actually care about Black people. It is a way to silence opposition to the Marxism they're trying to promote. And so when they force you to say out loud that you are against diversity, against equity, and against inclusion, they can point at you and say, this person is a racist, they hate women, they hate gay people, they hate transgender people. They're against all of these things that make up our society, and that's what makes them a terrible, hateful person. And if you're against inclusion even, like, what kind of a fascist are you, right? They're going to paint you as the worst person possible because, again, like, diversity and inclusion, as they are not terrible things. They are not terrible words. This is how they subvert them. Again, we've had Amazon come out. We've had the CAA agency in California for all the actors and content creators come out and literally say diversity means less white people and less men and less straight people. And if they are so mask off in saying that, but it's only a small group of us that are reading what these people are saying, most people can still be convinced that when these people use diversity, they mean real diversity, not the subversion that we know it to be. And since they don't know it as a subversion, when you say you're against diversity, you're going to look like an asshole to all of these people who have bought into the subversive language. And this is the hope between Sheryl Daija and wherever Sargon got this from, right? And he responded, he said, I oppose diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't think an obsession with skin color is a useful way to run anything. I am against forced equal outcomes on the basis of race, and I am for exclusivity and not inclusivity because boundaries are what make things worth having. And he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right with what he says. And there are going to be ways that you can explain these things without playing into the hand of the subversives that want to paint you as a terrible person. But first you have to convince people that they are subverting language in the first place, that when they talk about diversity, it doesn't really mean diversity. When they talk about inclusion, it's not actually inclusion. And when they talk about equity, equity is a poisonous word in and of itself. It does not mean equality. The same way anti-racist does not mean not racist. Anti-racist is just being racist to the correct people. They like to pull out the card of you must be racist if you're against these core principles, but it's not the actual principles we're against, it's the way they're being used to subvert. Yeah, exactly. Unity over diversity. Yeah, that's a better way of saying it. Some of these things were stretched hella far. It's mainly inclusiveness, though. People are dumb and lazy. 99% of them will never listen to you when you point out how it's subversive. At best, they'll call you a conspiracy theorist. You're incredibly right. You are incredibly right. There are not that many people, even at this point where Black Lives Matter has been around for ages. They've been outed as scam artists. They've been outed as, like, you know, laundering the money they were given. You watch, like, politicians and whatnot do fundraisers for getting them out of jail. There's still so many people that buy into Black Lives Matter and even do the thing where they're just like, I don't support the organization, but I support the message. And it's like, by supporting the message, you're supporting that subversive language because you don't know what you're talking about. And it's the same again with the anti-racism message. Like, this is par for the course. What would be the chances of being more Ruby Ridges if things went or go wrong with the left getting worse with this communist bullshit? I don't know, man. But I wanted to show off his tweet here because I think it's very relevant, because this is exactly what they were saying in their meeting yesterday. Get people to expressly say out loud that they are against diversity, equity, and inclusion, using those words and not the acronym, because you then, as the subversive agent, have a better fighting position. They didn't use subversive agent, but I'm explaining it for you guys. What's being framed as protection is, in reality, an orchestrated effort to roll back inclusion, erasing hard-fought protections for transgender, non-binary, and gender-expansive people. Let's be clear, this isn't about protection, it's about erasure. A clear pattern of discriminatory attacks. GLAAD has documented 227 plus policy and rhetorical attacks against LGBTQ plus Americans under the Trump administration. Brother, what? Statement and facts for reporters on latest discriminatory and inaccurate executive order targeting transgender Americans. Resources for accurate and inclusive coverage. A fact sheet for transgender participation in sports, gender justice, trans inclusion, terms to avoid gender ideology and transgenderism. These are made-up terms used by opponents of gender-diverse people in attempts to dehumanize them and justify discrimination and harassment. Are they serious? Are they fucking serious about this? Gender ideology is a made-up term used by opponents? If that's a made-up term, are you going to admit that your gender is also made up? Like, can we stop playing pretend here? Terms to avoid: biological male or biological female. Biological sex characteristics are complex and not binary, and characteristics like hormones, chromosomes, and anatomy vary from person to person. Terms like biological male are inaccurate to describe transgender athletes and some intersex athletes. Brother, what's the name of that stupid swimming guy? The swimming one that was like one of the first, like, super viral in every media outlet, like, fucking biological male in a woman's sport. I can't remember his name. Leah Thomas, thank you. Fucking Leah Thomas, they, like, paraded him around as, like, a true and pure transgender. And when we looked into him on stream and we went down, like, his Instagram and some of his Facebook stuff and whatever the fuck he's dating, I can't even remember what they are. Yeah, he's just an autogynephiliac. He's like, that's fucking just blatantly obvious, man. Fetish freak, pretty much. And Kirsche shaking 24/7 like Shamiko in the massage chair. Pretty horrifying days, true. Facts include, the Trump administration has amassed more than 227 attacks against LGBTQ Americans in policy and rhetoric, including recent inaccurate, graphic, inflammatory executive orders. What are these attacks? Executive orders have been blocked in court as unconstitutional and illegal. Multiple orders are being challenged in court. Transgender people have been playing sports for decades. The NCAA and International Olympic Committee have developed scientifically based guidelines to ensure fairness and inclusion for at least a decade. You see how they fucking framed this? It's fairness and inclusion when women receive a horrendous injury due to biological males. NCAA President Charlie Baker testified in December that he knew of less than 10 transgender college athletes out of 510,000 total. Well, good. If there's so few of them, then it doesn't really matter, right? IOC guidelines say there should be no presumed advantage based on sex assigned at birth or sex characteristics. Yeah, that's true. As you're going through male puberty and having excess amounts of testosterone, buffering your bone strength, your muscle density, and your reach and your height, none of that really matters. That's not an advantage against women. Women are exactly the same as men, and that's why if you as a man get yourself caught in a burning building, well, that's just your fault for being in the wrong place, ain't it? Sports bans are part of a systematic and expanding targeting of transgender people and youth that has surged to include their medically necessary and supported healthcare, book bans and curriculum bans, and access to the restroom. Research shows states that include transgender participation have more girls participating in sports than states with bans. Why does this matter? Why does this matter? Maybe they're just larger states? Maybe they have larger schools? Like, what is fucking so what, dude? It should only be biological females in girls' sports, man. Women and girls face significant barriers in sports that have nothing to do with transgender inclusion. Inequitable facilities, pay, marketing, abusive coaches, and racist, sexist, and homophobic harassment. Women have to deal with all these other problems, so they should just let fetishistic males have access to them and beating them out of scholarships before they even get to college. The whataboutery. A 2024 NCAA study shows female players receive a barrage of social media harassment. 80% of abusive posts were directed at March Madness athletes, with female basketball players receiving about 3 times more abusive messages than their male counterparts. Ask critics of trans inclusion for their policy proposals to address these real-life harms. What the fuck does this have to do with getting biological men out of women's sports? People saying mean things on social media is not the same thing. Like, what? The 2024 NCAA women's basketball and WNBA seasons and championships saw their highest ratings. 2 new winter women's basketball leagues are drawing robust crowds. A new professional women's hockey league is in its first season and recognizing contributions from diverse players. The NFL is looking into a women's flag football team, or league. Women's sports are expanding. There's no evidence trans inclusion is harming any area of sport. Well, that's because more people watch men's sports than women's sports. And I mean, if you have a chance to watch a man in a dress beat the fuck out of a woman, wouldn't you be at least a little bit curious how that's gonna go? Like, either because you're concerned for the woman's safety, you're someone who wants to write an article about it, you might just like watching women get beat up because you're crazy, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of reasons that people are going to tune into this because it just shouldn't be happening, man. Any guy in a women's hockey game is going to end with a killing. Jesus Christ. There's so expanding that no one watches them. And again, that's where the like pay gap comes from. Like, women's fucking teams do not get as much watch time as men, so they have less pay, less marketing, because all of that depends on how many people are tuning in. We saw that when that one lesbian chick was, like, complaining about her pay in comparison to the men's soccer teams, but then you saw the disparity in how much viewership men's soccer got versus women's soccer, and how they were all paid based on viewership, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, actually. VTubing is my favorite women's sports. The one sport where the men are resoundingly the losers. VTubing. The LFL got deep-sized by feminists. Women's soccer team keeps losing to teenage boys. True and real. Sports bans endanger all women and girls by encouraging baseless, false allegations and discriminatory invasive screening. All women are affected by policies that scrutinize and police women's bodies. Saying if you have a penis, if you are a biological male, you cannot play in women's sports is not endangering women and girls. Like, what kind of logic is this? Is this just like one of your coaches might be a molester, and if he has to check if you have a penis, he might molest you, and that's a danger to women and girls? What the fuck? A physical is invasive screening? Yeah, there is no logic, man. As far as I know, when you get the physicals done, they're usually done by a woman. Previous Trump orders inaccurately claiming there are only 2 sexes have failed to acknowledge the existence of intersex people and the impact of inaccurate orders on them. Do not confuse having an intersex trait with being transgender. Intersex people can have sex characteristics that fall outside strictly male and female bodies. I don't understand why they're trying so hard to push the, like, scientifically there are not 2 sexes, because does anybody remember how we got here? We got here by people saying, well, gender is different from sex, so you can be a biological male or a biological female, but your gender might be different from that. But now they're saying that you can't even talk about biological male and biological female. Those are no-no words, and it's actually just patently incorrect to even say that there are two sexes. They've been simultaneously trying to combine gender and sex for the longest time, while telling you, you're crazy, no one's doing that, gender and sex are two different things. Intersex is a deformity, people have to have corrective surgery. It is. And it's like, it sucks for those people, right? It sucks for the intersex people that they are both born with something they can't help and they can't change. And that now their condition is being used as a cudgel in this, like, deceptive ideology march in order to protect both ideologues pushing this shit as well as people with fetishes. It's the same as the actual very small percentage of genuine gender dysphoric people. That's an actual mental health condition, and I feel bad for the people that have to deal with that. That sucks to have as a lifelong condition, and I hope they can get the mental health care that they need. I hope these people like Buck Angel, like Blair White, can live as normally as they can. These are people who don't deny biological sex. They don't deny biological reality. They're just like, I feel more comfortable this way in my own brain. And I think that's perfectly fine for them to do so. They're not pushing it on kids. They're not forcing people to indulge them in anything. They're just like, I'm just fucking here, like you and everyone else. Blair White, Sophia Narwitz aren't real trans because they aren't pushing it on their audience and children. Yeah, they've gotten attacked for it. And same with Buck Angel. People harass that dude all the fucking time. And it's like, I feel bad because once again, these small percentage of actual dysphoric people have to deal with the ideologues especially attacking them, because if they talk about the truth and the reality of things, they're not advancing the desires of the ideologues and the fetishist, and they can't have that. It's in the best interest of the ideologues and the fetishists to keep conflating dysphoria with ideology and with fetish, because if they separate them, they lose their power. Head pats, head pats! Remember when gender used to be synonymous with biological sex, not what someone identifies as? It's another way for them to subvert the language to eventually phase out biological sex so it doesn't mean anything anymore? Yeah. The way that we used gender and sex was interchangeable for forever. And then the ideologues came in and they were like, well, actually, gender and sex are two different things. And now it's come full circle where they're like, oh, biological sex is actually offensive. That's not, there's not only two sexes, that's offensive. Gender and sex, I'm a biological female because I say so, you know? And you don't mind gender and sex being different, but that's where you draw the line. Wasn't until John Money, gender was purely a grammatical term. Yes, it was purely a grammatical term, but this was something that a lot of us in the 90s and the 2000s, when we were going through school, we learned about the terms gender and sex, and we used them to mean the same thing. So when we talked about gender, when we filled out forms that asked for your gender, we knew I was female, you're male, etc. And like putting that into our lexicon was the first part of subversion, right? Like we didn't need to use the word gender at any way, shape, or form. But introducing it to our lexicon, teaching it in the school systems, making us know that gender and sex are the same thing, primed us for when they took the next step to say, actually, now we know that gender and sex are different things, right? Because that was John Money's entire thing, was separating gender and sex. They weren't going to be able to convince people of this wholesale, especially if they looked into what John Money did, so they had to introduce that into our language slowly and as children. There, that's gender in English. You always thought sex was removed due to sensitivity and discomfort with sexuality around kids? No, it was a long con. It's always been a long con, baby. Today is National Girls and Women's in Sports Day, founded nearly 40 years ago to celebrate the accomplishments of women and girl athletes. The Women's Sports Foundation, which co-founded the Awareness Day, opposes bans on transgender participation in sports. I mean, good. They should. Changing the Game, now on Hulu, features transgender student athletes in their own words and lives. Here We Are and Southern Story Bank, GLAAD research shows fewer than 30% of non-LGBTQ Americans personally know a transgender person. These resources help introduce people to transgender families to combat demonization and dehumanization. Connect with GLAAD for interview opportunities with featured families. I was actually floored. People unironically like use this in argumentation, right? Like, when someone's just like, why do you even talk about any of this transgender stuff? Like, it doesn't affect you, Kirsche. Like, you could just not talk about it. It's like, well, first of all, it does affect me. Not just online, but personally. Like, my gynecologist office, I can't go there anymore. I've been going to the same gynecologist for 10 fucking years. And now they're going to be focusing only on biological women with cancer and otherwise doing transgender treatments. And, like, I went there for, like, a decade for my yearly checkups. And now they're even telling women, oh, you don't need to come yearly, just come every 5 years. That's not safe. Don't listen to them. And I like, when I pushed back on this, their response was, do you even know any transgender people? Are you even friends with any? And it's like, well, first of all, why does it fucking matter? But also, yes. But also, it doesn't matter if I know people who are transgender. It doesn't matter if I have trans friends. It doesn't matter that Tangerine's fiance is trans. It doesn't matter that I have trans people who watch my content or agree with me. Because they're just going to continue moving the goalposts. It's just like when someone was like, how can I be racist? I have a black friend. And they're like, oh, so you're defending your racism because you know a black person and you think that gives you an excuse. So, like, I was floored by, like, actually having this said to me in person. I was so fucking confused. You wish you can't count on one hand the amount of trans they-thems you've had to deal with, and you don't just saw someone from afar. Thankfully, I don't know any actual they-thems. Thankfully, the people that I have surrounded myself with are, for the most part, sane. They understand biological reality. They understand, like, oh, yeah, I have a bit of a mental health condition. It just, like, makes me feel more comfortable to be... you know, presenting as a man instead of a woman, blah, blah, blah. Like, they haven't gotten surgeries or anything. They're just like, I'm fucking struggling mentally. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I feel bad. I've had some of the crazies in my community before. I had some of them as moderators because they were people that I trusted, and then they unfortunately slowly fell down a propaganda hellhole and became more and more insane, to the point that one of my moderators, who was a guy, decided he was a woman, didn't have dysphoria, didn't have any of these actual issues, and started messaging people in the Discord and DMs asking how they felt about transgender people. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? How dare you go around to my community acting like some sort of fucking Gestapo, questioning them in DMs about how they feel about transgender people? That's fucking insane behavior. No longer a moderator, man. Obviously. The old Discord curse. It's the same thing. I had a lesbian friend. I was very close with her for many years, and she started going crazy as well. She had agreed with me for years. She was like, as a lesbian, I get targeted by these fetishistic males all the time. I have to deal with them in my spaces. I have to deal with them like trying to hit on me and trying to date me when I'm not interested in penis. It's like, these people are incredibly pushy about it as well. And then she started, you know, going a bit psychotic. She also started spreading fake news about Pippa. She started, like, she knew me for years, and she knew me through, like, my first collabs with Pippa. And she started saying that Pippa had, like, the mentality of, like, a spoiled rich girl, that she, like, expected, you know, just starting VTubers to be able to accomplish what she could under a corporation. And she just didn't understand the struggle of being a small content creator. I was like, how fucking dare you, dude? Actually, unironically, how fucking dare you? I think Azehara has an old clip of that scenario on his channel, because that was years ago. Envy? Yeah. And she unironically called Pippa, like, a hateful person spreading Nazi propaganda. And I was like, bro, you've been in my Discord for how fucking long? You've been my friend and a moderator for how fucking long? And you want to say Pippa's a hateful person? Dude, what? And this all culminated and, like, me getting rid of her for that. And then she sort of struggle sessioned me in DMs after I removed her as a mod, because you're not gonna fucking slander my friends like that, dude. You're not gonna fucking slander my friends and expect to stay on as a moderator. You had a bi friend who was somewhat liberal but drank the Kool-Aid, went full trans a few years ago. It's really fucking sad. That's unfortunate. And she ended up coming at me in DMs and being like, well, you're a hateful person and you're culminating this hateful audience, and they're going to turn on you one day. They're going to eat you alive like they always do, because people on the right, they hate women. You don't understand how much they hate you, but they're going to ruin you. Like, just making me, like, terrified, rather trying to terrify me of, like, the audience I'm cultivating. And it's like, the only person attacking me and the only person making threats is fucking you, lady. Like, I don't know what you're fucking saying here. She's not saying pee 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 pee. She's saying his Zeke 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 Zeke. You are quite the liberal until these people poisoned your friends and pushed you to become an evil centrist. Yeah, so I've like dealt with a couple of the crazies, but it's like this is also why I feel it very important to make the distinction between the people with dysphoria and the people who are ideologues or fetishists, or they're just either going along with the trend because they think it makes them a good person, or like they feel they can't break away from the trend because, oh, you gotta capitulate to the public opinion, or otherwise you're not gonna be able to make money off of streaming, you know? Thank God your gay acquaintances from high school managed to sidestep the groomer propaganda. Oh my God. We kink shaming now? Kink shaming is my kink, baby! How dare we attack the fox? It's just like all the people that think that my audience revolted against me for that Real Game Awards thing, where I promoted the award to fucking Barrett from Final Fantasy VII. It's like, baby, that was no one in my audience. I know you are literally poisoned by ideology and you wish to see me crash and burn. Nobody in my audience gave a shit. These resources help introduce people to transgender families to combat demonization and dehumanization, connect with GLAAD for interview opportunities with featured families. Statement from GLAAD: this administration's latest inaccurate and incoherent piece of paper smears an entire group of Americans, but does not change the law or the facts. All women and girls, including transgender women and girls, should be welcome to play sports if they want. That's true. But transgender women and girls should not be playing in the Women's Sports League. Make decisions about their own bodies, be hired for jobs they are qualified for, and be free from lawless attacks by extremists in elected office. Are they really extremists if they got, like, elected normally? I mean, I guess that's a fucking straw man, isn't it? Because people vote for dumb shit all the time. Never mind, chat. I had a dumb woman moment. Anti-LGBTQ politicians with a record of abusing and silencing women and stripping their health care have zero credibility in any conversation about protecting women and girls. Shall we what? Shall we what? Every American should look to real heroes fighting for liberty, justice, and equality for all, and demand that public officials stop attacking Americans and start doing their jobs, solving actual problems. A Trump executive orders blocked in court, targeting birthright citizenship, indefinitely blocked, blatantly unconstitutional, 22 states in 5 lawsuits. Targeting trans inmates, twice blocked, including Tuesday's order barring prison officials from transferring 3 transgender women to men's facilities and terminating their access to medication. Targeting federal funding freeze, twice blocked, violates a 50-year-old impoundment law prohibiting executive branch from holding funding appropriated by Congress. I like how they're saying that because some things got blocked by people, that means that these are bad things. That's not necessarily what that means. That's not the right quote. The important question in this case is, do you value freedom of association? True and real. Lawsuits filed. The Transgender Military Service, GLAAD Law and National Center for Lesbian Rights, on behalf of 6 active duty transgender military personnel and 2 recruits, Lambda Legal successfully defeated Trump's previous attempt to ban open service 7 years ago. Yeah, but I mean, they were just told to get the fuck out yesterday, so, you know. Healthcare, the ACLU, PFLAG, I don't know what that is, GLAM, on behalf of transgender young adults and family. Lambda Legal via CBS News, substantial confidence that much of what this administration appears determined to do will not stand. It's blatantly defying settled law in a range of ways. I like how the law is settled once they change it, but, you know, it wasn't settled before they changed it. I know. It's interesting how that works. New York Attorney General Letitia James told hospitals they would be violating state law if they stop offering care for transgender people under age 19 in response to a Trump executive order. DEI higher education professors and university diversity officers in the city of Baltimore unlawfully vague and sowing chaos and confusion. There's a whole lot of fucking nothing in this article. A whole lot of just trust us, we're the good guys. Back to Sheryl Daija here. This is where it says GLAAD has documented the 227 plus policy and rhetorical attacks, but this didn't list them. And then it linked us to here. Trump Accountability Tracker, 241 attacks on LGBTQ people. 2025. These are like paragraphs, man. This isn't like a fucking list. Are you kidding? endorsed North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson for governor, despite Robinson's history of anti-LGBTQ disinformation and rhetoric, including calling gay people filth and maggots. Trump repeated his past claims that Robinson is better than Martin Luther King, and Martin Luther King on steroids. Is there like a source for this? But also there's that meme that says when a man watches two men kiss, he feels the same level of disgust as when he sees maggots. So, I mean, you know, he endorses this. Where does he say that they were filth? Repeating his past bizarre claims at a campaign event, promoting reading Adolf Hitler. What? Robinson, the first black lieutenant governor of North Carolina, has repeatedly made headlines for his contentious remarks about LGBTQ plus community, as well as anti-Semitic comments, including Holocaust denial and promoting reading Adolf Hitler. I mean, is promoting reading Hitler saying you should read this to understand what happened? Because, like, that's true, and not an endorsement of what Hitler did. There's a difference between promoting reading what the man said to understand how bad things were and promoting the text therein. Is this a literal brown racist? Robinson has said that transgender women should be arrested for using women's bathroom. He also said that instead of using the women's bathroom, trans women should find a corner outside somewhere to go. Isn't that what men do? Isn't that unironically what men do? Republican has described straight couples as superior to gay couples, as well as equated LGBTQ people to maggots and flies, and referred to homosexuality as transgenderism as filth. But, like, where? Where has he said this? This man looks like he's made with AI. North Carolina Governor said Christians must take control. Children are being abused and taught filth.
We have got to wrestle this away from those.
The fuck is going on down here?
Why? Because it is flat out child abuse. Take your children and tell them they have to attend school. Don't have a choice. And then some of them will tell them they don't want you to have a choice where they go to school. You have to send your children here to school. Then when they get there, what do they teach them? Teach them a bunch of stuff about how to hate America. Teach them a bunch of stuff about why they're racist. Teach them a bunch of stuff about transgenderism and homosexuality. I'm saying this now, and I've been saying it, and I don't care who likes it. Those issues have no place in a school.
True. Preach.
There's no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth.
True.
And yes, I called it filth. And if you don't like it that I called it filth, come see me and I'll explain it to you.
And he's specifically referring to teaching it to children as well. So, like, where the fuck is he wrong? That means that all of these things where they're just like, oh, he's calling specifically this stuff filth, and it's like, well, you're taking him out of context, my guys. Angry governor, then he says, yes, I called it filth. There's no debate here. This is open discrimination. No, children should not be taught about this shit. What do you mean? What do you mean? This is not for children. They're quoting this guy out of context. They're making it look worse than what he actually said. Let us continue. A set of transgender athletes at a rally. Who would even think that you can allow this? Who would say that this is okay? These people are sick. They're deranged. It's astonishing how passionately people react to that. When you talk about tax cuts, they remain calm. But when you mention transgender issues, everyone goes wild. Who would have imagined 5 years ago that they wouldn't even know what it meant? I mean, he's not wrong. He's not fucking wrong. Invited activist Riley Gaines on stage at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, as he baselessly claimed that left-wing lunatics encourage unfair competition in sports. Gaines has profited by spreading disinformation about transgender people and athletes after tying for 5th place with a transgender swimmer at the NCAA championships. Gaines went on to endorse Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for president over Trump. I don't think that matters, right? Like, he doesn't have to, like, hate someone because they endorsed someone else prior to him, especially because DeSantis is cracking the fuck down on this shit in schools in Florida. They screwed with the kids, unironically and literally. This is the whole list of fucking based things that have happened, I suppose. I fucking suppose. Back to Sheryl Daija for real this time. GLAAD has documented 227 plus policy and rhetorical attacks against LGBTQ plus Americans under the Trump administration. One of the most alarming recent actions is the January 20th, 2025 executive order titled defending women from gender ideology extremism, and restoring biological truth to the federal government. This order mandates federal agencies to interpret sex strictly as biological, effectively eliminating gender identity recognition in policy. Good, because that's the way that it should be. Removes all federal agency materials that promote gender inclusion or acknowledge non-binary identities. Good, because there's only two sexes. They already have legal protections, and non-binary shouldn't be acknowledged. Blocks federal funding for gender-affirming care, restricting access to essential medical treatment. Okay, also good, because this is specifically for children. While framed as a measure to protect women and children, these policies unequivocally deliver the opposite. They seek to eliminate protections for transgender, non-binary, and gender-expansive individuals, making them more vulnerable to discrimination, healthcare restrictions, and workplace exclusions. The false narratives of protection. Redefining women's rights to exclude transgender people. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has aligned with this directive, making changes that eliminate workplace protections for transgender and non-binary employees, removing previous guidance on gender identity discrimination. Prioritizing biological sex over inclusive workplace policies, signaling that gender identity will no longer be a protected category. And it never should have been. People should not get privileges because they want to use it as a cudgel to beat people into accepting their ideology or their fetish. Roll back protections for employees who do not conform to binary gender norms, leaving them more vulnerable to workplace discrimination. I remember reading articles here where like funeral homes would have a male employee uniform and a female employee uniform. And then like a guy would decide that he's a woman because he wants to bring his fetish to a funeral fucking home. And he wants to wear the women's like skirted outfit in front of grieving families. And it's just like, bro, man, I get that you are coon-brained out of your fucking mind. And you could beat back any other Reddit tier gooner with just your one jack-off hand. But, you know, time and a place, right? And like these people get off on forcing it into the worst of places. Like you can see with the White House lawn as well. The like transgender individuals that like took their tops off and jiggled their tits on the White House lawn. They do that because it will feed into their fetish. They know that people are going to get upset by it. They know that they're going to be shamed by it, and they crave that shit. Remarkably, still not the worst fetish to be in a funeral home. A funeral home, really? I don't remember how long ago we read that article, but I'm pretty sure it was a New York funeral home, and I'm pretty sure it was either last year or the year before. Rather than protecting women, these changes reduce protections for anyone who does not fit their definition, which recognizes two sexes. No, this does protect women. This does protect women, because regardless of whether you are just a regular woman or you're one of the small percentage of people like Buck Angel, who has gender dysphoria, you are still a biological woman, and you will face all of the biological realities that come along with that. What's the worst one? And is it not necrophilia? No, it is necrophilia. But Kirsche, they need to be noticed. They just want to show they exist. How dare you deny their right to show off their fetish? Particular individual mental states are not biological reality. They can create more and more genders or thinking they have no gender. How do you make policies recognizing a fluid mental state that can change at any minute? I mean, I made the joke about obesity earlier, but that's what gender expansive is. The gender expansive are like the fluid people who are like, oh, sometimes I'm male, sometimes I'm non-binary, sometimes I'm female, sometimes I'm one of the other 52 genders recognized by the state of New York, right? Like, I don't fucking remember all of the fake shit. All the terrible realities of being a woman. I just want to be a pudding. Framing anti-transgender policies as child protection. Several policies targeting transgender youth have been introduced under the pretense of safeguarding children, including cuts to federal funding for gender-affirming care for minors, making puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and gender-affirming procedures financially inaccessible. There should be no federal funding for any of this. All of it is either cosmetic or it's butchery. Like people are being sold, whether they're cum-brained out of their mind, dedicated to their fetish like Ramelia, or whether they're someone in a mental health crisis being taken advantage of by the medical health complex. Either way, this is either cosmetic or butchery. We should not be funding this federally. Tax dollars should not be going to this, especially for minors. They said for so long that, like, oh, puberty blockers are necessary because if they go through the regular puberty, they could never realize their trans identity later on because they'll go through the regular puberty for the wrong gender, and that just won't be okay. But, like, even if you wanted to consent to having your penis turned inside out and your colon being used for the walls of your neo-vagina, you need to go through male puberty to have enough product to craft this Frankenstein horror in the first place. And, like, Jazz Jennings was one of the first people who was told, since you started hormone blockers early, I'm pretty sure Jazz Jennings started hormone blockers at the age of 9 or 10. I could be misremembering because it was a very fucking long time ago, but I'm pretty sure he was like 9 or 10 when he started taking them. He could have been a little older. I can't remember off the top of my head. Regardless, he was very fucking young, and he was told by the doctor, because you were on blockers, that gave you some advantages, right? Your voice didn't get deep, you didn't get as much body hair, you didn't develop as much, musculature that a male would have going through puberty. However, your penis also didn't grow in size during puberty, and so there's not enough material here to work with to do the traditional neovaginal surgeries. It's like, if you want to just look into a world of horror, I would suggest watching I Am Jazz. It is a terrifying clown world show. I, for one, welcome our greatest fictional creation in cinema, wood chipper aliens. What if they become normal after puberty, Kirsche? Did you think of that? They need to be trans. Imagine them becoming normal. Stop taking blockers. That sounds like a nightmare. The mother kept saying he wanted... Yeah, the mother is, like, definitionally Munchausen's by proxy. And, like, I have been saying for years, like, even before the clips came out of his mother being like, sometimes Jazz doesn't want to dilate and I have to go in there with the dilator and just be like, you put this inside of your vagina right now or I'll do it for you. Like, even before those fucking crazy clips came out, I was like, one day Jazz is gonna decide this was an entire fucking mistake and he is going to brutally murder his whole family. As, like, I'm calling that back in 2012. I'm calling it again now. Fucking what? Yeah, no, it is a horrifying show to watch. There was a clip that came out, like, either last year or in 2023. Again, I'm really bad at remembering timelines. But there was a clip of, like, Jazz on his bed being like, I don't really know who I am anymore. I don't know if I've made the right decisions. And the mother, like, absolutely being like, no, you wanted this. This was the right thing to do. And it's like, bitch, please. Jazz is currently a ticking time bomb. I feel incredibly fucking bad for them, unironically. You're saying if any male decides, hey, I'm gender fluid and lesbian, wouldn't that make domestic abuse much worse? That would just be increasing the lesbian domestic violence statistics, right? Because, I mean, as of right now, there are plenty of men who are adding to the women's crime statistics. Because for some reason, they're being treated as women and not as men. Did this kid get therapy? Oh, of course he did. But the therapy obviously fast-tracked him into the, you're definitely trans, obviously. Like, what else could you be? Pressure on hospitals to stop treating transgender youth, forcing some medical providers to discontinue care out of fear of losing federal funding. Good. Good. These children should not be put on blockers or hormones. Threats against schools that support transgender students, including legal action against teachers who allow students to socially transition. Also good. There have been too many cases already of parents losing their parental rights, both here and in Canada, because they don't want their children to transition. They understand that their children are just going along with things that they have seen and heard in school. It would be a bad parent to encourage this kind of shit. By labeling gender-affirming healthcare and education policies as harmful, these measures remove vital support systems for transgender youth while creating fear and uncertainty for families, schools, and healthcare providers. Bridge, go forward. These reversals are not just political. They have significant implications for workplaces, communities, and public policy. Here are some ideas that we can collectively action on as business leaders, allies, and advocates. For business leaders and employees, reaffirm your commitment to inclusive policies that explicitly protect employees of all gender identities. Review HR policies to ensure workplace protections for transgender employees remain intact. Support employee resource groups focused on LGBTQ+ inclusion and gender equity. For advocates and allies, use clear, fact-based language when discussing these policies to counter misinformation. Amplify the work of advocacy organizations like GLAAD and the ACLU, which are actively challenging these reversals. For policymakers and community leaders, a push for state and local protections to counteract federal-level policy shifts. And educate stakeholders, not shareholders, stakeholders, from corporate leadership to local government on the real impact of these measures on vulnerable communities. Policies framed as protection should not be used as a pretext for exclusion. These reversals do not defend women or safeguard children. They restrict rights, limit protections, and create barriers. Thank you, Sheryl Daija, for this insight. I really wish that, there were comments on this thing, because I would love to see... Oh, wait, there are. These are the comments. This is Welt Buiger, World Changer. I don't know what that is. Thank you, Sheryl, for shining a light on such a crucial issue. Your insights on the intersection of protection and inclusion are vital for driving meaningful change in our workplaces and society. Looking forward to engaging in this important conversation. And then they put a link to their little LinkedIn page. Sheryl responded, I appreciate your support within our workplaces. It's critical that companies safeguard inclusion in the face of these challenges, or otherwise, as you know, we risk progress being undone. Cloud Hire, I don't know what that is either, said, what a powerful and necessary discussion. Promoting equity for all is essential for building inclusive workplaces. Let's ensure every voice matters. #inclusion matters. And Sheryl replied, appreciate your thoughts. You're totally right when policies disguise protection as exclusion. We all have a role to play in making every voice count. I look forward to continuing the conversation. Who liked this shit? Jason Latter, Media Relations at ADP, Lou Pascalis, senior marketers and ad tech CEOs hone their narrative leadership skills. I don't know what the fuck he does as a job. Cecilia Shang Benting, a business and EB5 attorney. KJ Flores, get marketing help. Samantha Datrica, branding and social media strategist, production team lead at Technopunks, founder at the Balyam, marketing and social impact enthusiast. Technopunks sounds familiar. Technopunk sounds like something I briefly heard about while going down the Sweet Baby sidestepped occultance rabbit hole. You like that name, Technopunks? Sadia Mauder-Bocus attended University of Mauritius. I don't know what that is. Erica DiLorenzo, she's someone who comes to the bridge meetings pretty often. She's a purpose-driven industry leader, people connector, partnership and business operations specialist, community builder and social entrepreneur. Abbas Sanda just says karma. Dan Golden, 9th NASA chief, ISS plus web plus 61 astronaut missions. Allison Daltroy, digital learning resource manager at Taylor and Francis Books. Jeff Edwards, Gale, RGA, CAA. Oh, CAA, the fucking artist agency, dude. David Kaplan, a B2B content strategist, all editorial for brands, platforms, publishers, and agencies. And then whatever the fuck Cloud Hire is. ADP, of course, it's a payroll company. What is a social entrepreneur? It's basically just another word for DEI acolyte. Anyone these days who says their punks are just bootlickers, essentially. You paid more than your underlings, fuck equity, you're the journeyman that gets the government contracts. Look forward to the day we look at this shit the same way we look at lobotomies now. Same and true. Alright, back to the initial put-if from Bridge. For more context, is what we just read, the weaponizing protection thing. Executive Order 14173, ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. The legal people who are working with Sheryl Daija interpreted this as a separate executive order directs federal agencies, including the Department of Justice, Labor, and Education, to use their administrative powers to undermine and attack DEI initiatives by non-federal public and private entities under the authority of the federal government, and asserts DEI and DEIA diminishes the importance of individual merit, aptitude, and hard work. There are two parts to this order. The first part of the order requires federal contracts and grants to eliminate any DEI requirements, revoking the long-standing Executive Order 11246 that provides the basis for affirmative action data collection and reporting mandates, and compels contractors and grantees to certify that they are not operating DEI programs that conflict with federal anti-discrimination laws. Importantly, while these changes affect federal contracting obligations, non-federal entities are not forced to abandon lawful DEI practices. Once again, the same thing as all of the other executive orders. They're just reassuring all of the corporations and the private sector that they do not have to abide by anything the executive orders say. Additionally, neither the Trump administration nor any federal agency operating under the control of the Trump administration has the authority to determine what DEI practices are unlawful under existing anti-discrimination law. Only federal courts are empowered to make that determination. Current federal case law is favorable towards a host of DEI practices. References from Stacey Hawkins, How Diversity Can Redeem the McDonnell-Douglas Standard, Mounting an Effective Title VII Defense of the Commitment to Diversity in the Legal Profession. It looks like it's 3 different links, but I guess it's just because it's lines, it's the same link. This article undertakes an analysis, both quantitative and qualitative, of the developing body of Title VII diversity law. The jurisprudence of diversity was first developed by the U.S. Supreme Court in equal protection cases, but it has not been confirmed to that context. In particular, lower federal courts have been adjudicating cases asserting an interest in diversity as a means of challenging or justifying race and ethnicity or gender-conscious policies and or practices under Title VII. These cases have given rise to a body of Title VII diversity law that has remained largely unexplored in the scholarly literature. Because these cases have gone largely unnoticed, they have not been mined for any guidance that might offer employers generally and legal employers specifically on how best to structure workplace diversity efforts to minimize the risk of legal liability under Title VII and, conversely, to maximize their Title VII defense. This article surveys these cases and offers an analysis that seeks to 1. Situate the developing body of diversity law within the existing Title VII landscape, and 2. Inform the development of legally defensible workplace diversity programs. They are gunning back. They are gunning back at all of the people trying to dismantle the nonsense diversity laws. Can't wait for our warbirds to break up or fall out of the fucking sky. Sure, law firms are itching to see their malpractice insurance rates go up. The second part of the order targets non-federal entities that are subject to the enforcement power of the federal government under existing federal anti-discrimination laws, including Titles 6, 7, and 9, which regulate race and sex discrimination in education and employment. This part of the order directs those federal agencies with enforcement power under those laws, namely the Departments of Justice, Labor, and Education, to specifically target for investigation and possible litigation those entities who are or may be engaged in DEI efforts that involve race or sex-based preferences, or that are unlawful under anti-discrimination law. As with the first part of this order, the federal courts, not the Trump administration, are empowered to make the determination of what DEI practices, if any, are unlawful under existing anti-discrimination law. Before terminating or modifying any DEI efforts in response to this order, non-federal public and private sector entities subject to the order should confer with legal counsel to determine the need to terminate or modify their DEI programs, policies, or practices under applicable federal law. So here what this is saying is that basically the Trump administration doesn't really have the power to enact this executive order, that is to the courts. So as long as there is some challenge being brought to the courts around this executive order, you don't have to comply, but you should still seek legal counsel with someone who can help ensure that you have the best defense in case anyone comes knocking trying to say that you're running afoul of the executive order. And this is why we need to remain vigilant. The cult will not stop. Absolutely. Department of Education is gone, though, right? To my knowledge, yes. He has completely dismantled the Department of Education. Like ending the woke crap. You're welcome. The bridge point of view of all of this legal jargon. Bridge regards this order as a deliberate attempt to dismantle critical DEI initiatives that have been instrumental in advancing, equitable outcomes and seeks to undermine progress. The misinterpretation of DEI as lacking in merit is a tactic our founder and CEO, Sheryl Daija, examines in depth in The Hypocrisy of Meritocracy. Meritocracy is defined as a social system, society, or organization in which people attain success or power because of their abilities, not because of wealth or social position. Critics of DEI have asserted this definition repeatedly as an attack against DEI, stating that women and brown and black people are hired based on race and gender rather than their qualifications, pejoratively labeling them DEI hires. Wait. See, this is where the bird hits the window. No one is asserting that all women, all black people, all brown people, every single one has only been hired because of their sex or their skin color. The fact is that since affirmative action has existed for so long, and since many of these activists have pushed in the public eye for so long, that women and black and brown people cannot compete on an even playing field without having something that gives them a distinct advantage over white men based on their sex or their skin color, there's a lot that's called into question. And again, because of how this is, public perception now becomes a bit wary whenever someone who is a black person or is a woman is put into a position of power or put into a noticeable position. Some people will be like, well, how did they get there? Do they deserve to be there? What's their background? These questions typically wouldn't be asked if everything was merit-based, but it exacerbates the issue of thinking that women or black people are unfit for a position if the entire basis is you need to pick them based on not their qualifications, but their immutable characteristics. Did they just reveal themselves as racist, misogynists, and homophobes in one sitting? Always have been. And even more egregious is the narrative that, therefore, these hirings lower the standards in products and services. Set by whom? And are the cause of dangerous situations like bridge collapses and plane crashes. I mean, that's just like true though. That's just the reality of how things are. When you lower standards to allow people to get jobs that they are otherwise unqualified for, the standards are going to drop all around. Like, you're not going to have the same product. And we see this in the tech industry, where they are very quickly running out of people who know how to use and maintain legacy systems. She said the thing. Maintaining the power status quo. This couldn't be further from the truth, and the hypocrisy of meritocracy is on full display as cabinet members are being paraded through the confirmation hearings and appointed. So let's start calling it what it is: maintaining the power status quo. To illustrate the point, Pete Hegseth, the nominee for Secretary of Defense, a political commentator for Fox News and former weekend co-host of Fox and Friends, was accused of his disregard for laws of war, financial mismanagement, racist and sexist remarks about men and women in uniform, alcohol abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and other troubling issues, as compared to Secretary of Defense Lloyd James Austin III. Secretary Austin holds the unique distinction of having commanded in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan at the 1, 2, 3, and 4-star levels, and was the first African American to command a division, corps, and field army in combat. He is a recipient of the Silver Star and 5 Defense Distinguished Service Medals. All right, see, you can't just take two people and say only bad things about one person and only good things about the other person and expect to be able to compare them without bias. What are the good things that Pete Hegseth did? What are the bad things that Lloyd James Austin did? Did either of them do anything that might have pushed them in the forefront for the position? Did Lloyd James Austin get snubbed for a position that he rightfully deserves? I don't know. I don't know the lives intricately of these people. Are they both equally good at talking on TV? I mean, the Democrat media smeared someone the Democrats hate? Holy logic, Batman. Didn't you love how they always ignore Pete Hegseth's career in the military? It's like, if you want to compare them, then you should put the good and the bad for both, right? It seems a little weird that they wouldn't do it for both. It's all about power, identity, Marxism, a power struggle between identity groups, yeah. RFK Jr., the nominee for Secretary of Health and Human Services, is a politician and conspiracy theorist. He is an anti-vaccine activist and the chairman and founder of Children's Health Defense, a group advocating against vaccines and promoting misinformation regarding COVID-19 vaccines. In February 1984, literally, he pleaded guilty to a single felony charge of possession of heroin. Nominated in return for his endorsement of Trump, he was promised control of several public health agencies, including the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, if he wins the appointment. As compared to Xavier Becerra, the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Secretary Becerra was the Attorney General of California. Secretary Becerra also served in the House of Representatives from 1993 to 2017, becoming the first Latino to sit on the Ways and Means Committee. While in the House, Secretary Becerra led the Congressional Hispanic Caucus from 97 to 99 and was vice chairman of the House Democratic Caucus from 09 to 2013. When Becerra entered the job, just 5.8% of Latinos had been fully vaccinated. According to the CDC, estimates for recipients whose race and ethnicity are unknown. 1 year later, as a result of Becerra's advocacy, 52.3% of Latinos were fully vaccinated. Holy shit. Holy shit. How the fuck did he do that? How the fuck did he do that? Fuck Becerra. I don't know anything about like the backgrounds of these people. First of all, felony charge, possession of heroin, that's kind of fucking crazy. But also, it was 1984? Also, that's kind of fucking long ago, man. Literally making up of numbers. Already enough to disqualify. 3, Charles Kushner, appointed as ambassador to France, the father of Donald Trump's son-in-law, and a man the president-elect once pardoned for a felony conviction that the former Republican New Jersey governor, Chris Christie, an ex-federal prosecutor, called one of the most loathsome, disgusting crimes he ever prosecuted. I don't know anything about that either. Compared to Denise Campbell Bauer, ambassador to France, an experienced diplomat, nonprofit leader, and advocate for women's voices in policies and politics and policy. She served as the United States ambassador to the Kingdom of Belgium from August 2013 to January 2017, where she led one of the largest embassies in Europe and earned a reputation for her collaborative leadership style, high ethics standards, and crisis management skills. In that role, she focused on building transatlantic security partnerships and expanding international trade. I mean, I'm not a huge fan if he's like hiring family members, but also what are the credentials here? Does Mr. Kushner have credentials to be an ambassador to France? Because if he does, then he could compete for the position. Like maybe it's nepotism, but also you're giving a very biased view of these two people. You just don't believe Sheryl here. Why am I reading this? Because it's from Sheryl Daija. This is from the CEO of Bridge. This is from the CEO of Bridge, and she is the one informing and guiding the private sector corporations on how to hide DEI. Knowing how your enemies think is very important. You can imagine Sheryl asking an AI to describe Trump's appointments in the worst light. Yeah, pretty much, dude. Notice the subversion. They're only pointing out the bad of one, but the good from the other. Yeah, it's like maybe she could be right that some are more qualified, but I wouldn't know because she's giving such a biased view here that I can't take it seriously. Dismantling the hypocrisy of meritocracy. DEI practitioners have never advocated for the hiring of unqualified individuals. The role of DEI is to break the systemic structures that have historically excluded qualified talent and expand opportunities to those who have been arbitrarily denied access. If meritocracy were truly the guiding principle, then why do unqualified, well-connected individuals continue to be appointed to critical roles, while experienced, proven leaders face scrutiny and dismissal under the guise of DEI hiring? Which of these is lowering standards? Well, I mean, again, nepotism can be a problem, but also, if you are good at networking in your field, you're going to become well-connected, not through nepotism, but through your own, like, networking ability. That's just, like, part of your job, especially if you're a public figure. I am very bad at networking, chat. It is one of my greatest weaknesses. People are terrifying, and I just get too overwhelmed and don't answer DMs. While the legal challenges continue to be sorted out in the courts, DEI practices remain legal as long as they comply, as always, with existing anti-discrimination laws, including diversity in employment practices, including hiring and promotion, diversity of opinion and opportunity in the workplace, sustained attempts to reach a diversity of populations in the marketplace. if they weren't using diversity in the subversive manner that they are, right? Like, just naturally, diversity would just exist, right? In some places, yeah, you might have a very homogenous corporation. It just very much depends. But, like, when we know how they're using diversity, and we know that they do not actually value diversity of opinion, it just kind of comes off as, what are you doing here? Working with a multitude of vendors and partners from different backgrounds and experience, promoting respect and inclusion in the workplace and business. An audit of current programs, policies, and practices is also encouraged to ensure legal compliance and risk in the current environment, so that companies are the best positioned to continue this important work without becoming a legal or PR target. For people who haven't looked into Bridge yet, I just wanted to give a reminder that they have people from all kinds of companies here. Like, these are companies directly working together with Bridge. You don't have to, like, pay Bridge to become a partner, to, like, use their language, right? You can still abide by what they're pushing corporations to do. And especially if there's so many of these large corporations working together with Bridge, you might not think that your company needs to pay Bridge to become a partner. So just because they're not listed here doesn't mean they're not following the Bridge directives. But these are the very, very closely working with Bridge companies, people who are advising Bridge, people who are helping direct where the initiatives are going to be going. You have Nielsen, you have MilkPep, you have Gap, Sonos, the Weather Company, Sephora, Discover, Saucony, iHeartMedia, Discover again, Michelin, H&M, the Index Exchange, Universal Music Group, Amazon Web Services, AdsMobile, NBC Universal, another Ad Council, Nestle Health Science, Media Brands, Direct Digital Holding, Indeed, Publicis Group. You have like McKinsey and Company, where all those bunk studies fucking come from. Bridge staff and contributors. These are just people directly at Bridge here. And more strategic advisors. We have the Coca-Cola Company chair. We have, I don't even know what this guy is at. Executive Director, City Year, San Jose. We have another iHeartMedia person, Purpose Worldwide. An Indiana University person, Campbell's, the fucking soup people. Again, I hate them. Emory University. Like, these are companies that should absolutely be looked at with intense scrutiny, especially when someone claims if one of their companies are dropping DEI. Michelin, the fucking tire company? Yes. It's the soup lady! It's where this all began. Lawsuits filed, preliminary injunctions. Federal court pauses significant portion of Trump's executive orders, ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. On February 3rd, 2025, a coalition of plaintiffs featuring the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, the American Association of University Professors, Restaurant Opportunity Centers United, and the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore, Maryland, the plaintiffs' coalition, brought a lawsuit in Maryland federal court challenging the constitutionality of Trump's executive orders. On Friday, February 21st, a Maryland federal judge granted a nationwide preliminary injunction blocking enforcement of 3 key provisions of the new administration's executive orders, which directed 1. All federal agencies to terminate equity-related grants or contracts, 2. Federal agencies to require future grant award recipients and federal contractors to certify that they do not operate any programs promoting DEI, and 3. The Attorney General to take action to deter DEI in the private sector. A preliminary injunction is temporary relief to preserve the status quo, while the parties continue to litigate the case. The plaintiffs' coalition ultimately seeks a permanent injunction, striking down the challenged provisions of the executive orders. The government has already indicated its intent to appeal the preliminary injunction order to the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, filing a notice of appeal on February 24th, 2025. This is a rapidly developing situation, which we will continue to monitor closely. There's some additional resources here. DEI Executive Orders, Davis and Gilbert. This is probably just a list of what Trump has done. Federal court pauses a significant portion of President Trump's orders. Yeah, that looks like what this is. Just another list here. Navigating the new executive orders, impact on DEI and gender identity protections at work. Yeah, this is just another article reiterating stuff like this. Executive orders do not mean that companies need to cease practices intended to diversify their workforce and to promote inclusion and belonging. DEI initiatives remain legal as long as they comply with anti-discrimination laws. Employers should consult with legal counsel as they shape their continued DEI efforts moving forward. Bridge invites everyone to join monthly calls. Next one is March 27th. Bridge 25 Forward, that's their retreat in May. Our commitment is to deliver an experience that will be unapologetically indelible, determined, and audacious. Thank you, Bridge. Just a rich elite making sure the ladders they kick down stay down. Well, you need to have a nice, cute, compelling slave class underneath you. Trump would love if these get to the Supreme Court. They're falling for a pretty obvious trap, but they have little recourse as this is ruining their business. You fucking hate their slogan. Yeah, their slogans are pretty, yeah, no. So in the Smart Brief that came out on Wednesday, the February 26th Smart Brief, inside my email, it says, Daija says good CEOs know DEI is key for business growth. As political pressure from President Donald Trump's executive orders on DEI has resulted in some companies rolling back programs, Sheryl Daija, founder and CEO of Bridge, says others are evolving their DEI strategies, understanding them as essential for business growth and not merely as risk factors. If you're a good CEO, you understand what the opportunity is, and then you say, okay, how are we going to mitigate the risk against that opportunity? And let me bring up this article for you guys. And this was also something that was discussed in the Bridge meeting. When Meta was brought up, she was saying that she feels that Meta is not sticking to the work, just like that article that we read. She said that she thinks that Meta is trying to obfuscate what they are doing. They're trying to play both sides while pretending to be committed while capitulating to the presidential administration. So she is not happy with Meta. This is published by someone named Lamar Johnson, and I think that a lot of other YouTubers who cover DEI stuff are going to start seeing Sheryl Daija's name, and they're just not going to know any of her backstory, so I don't know if they're going to, like, look into her when they start seeing it more often, because, again, she has been networking like fucking crazy. And even when I pointed out that, like, Microsoft wasn't getting rid of DEI and they had Bridge on their panel at the Cannes Lions Festival, I was still basically ignored for months until it was obvious that Microsoft wasn't ditching their DEI practices, and then I think it was, well, I can't remember if it was Fandom Pulse or Park Place. One of them cited me when I had pointed out the fucking Microsoft shit. And I think, Smash JT might have also cited me on the Microsoft shit. DEI is only essential for business growth because the bankers won't give lines of credit to businesses that don't fall in line. It's a little harrowing, you know? Recent DEI shifts represent an evolution of the practice, says Bridge. Companies should understand the opportunities DEI programs present before assessing risk mitigation needs amid increased scrutiny, counsels DEI Trade Group CEO Sheryl Daija. President Donald Trump began his term looking to roll back government diversity, equity, and inclusion programs issued by his predecessor with a spate of January 20th executive orders. Trump followed with a January 21st order for federal agencies to target private sector DEI programs. A wave of companies rolled back their DEI programs last summer, after conservative activists targeted companies in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision outlawing affirmative action in higher education. With Trump's election, a number of public companies like McDonald's, Meta, a few banks, and others preemptively adjusted policies. At the same time, private companies like Accenture and Deloitte have begun reviewing and adjusting programs and disclosures following the executive order. Sheryl Daija, founder and CEO of Bridge, the first global marketing industry trade group for DEI, said in an interview with ESG Dive that it is important for companies to understand the opportunity that DEI programs present before mitigating risk, not the other way around. there's this fear, and companies are just going, okay, well, we're just going to get rid of this practice, and they're not going, okay, hold on a second, Daija said. If you're a good CEO, you understand what the opportunity is, and then you say, okay, how are we going to mitigate the risk against that opportunity? There's a risk in every opportunity, and that's not necessarily what we're seeing, Daija added. I would say to everybody, understand the opportunity that diversity, equity, and inclusion offers, and then mitigate your risk against it. I feel like we've read like 5 paragraphs worth of shit, and they have literally just repeated the same thing over and over and over. They're like, understand the opportunity. Mitigate risk against it after. Don't risk mitigate first, because then you'll miss the opportunity. I just like, it's like a fucking cult chant that if you repeat enough times, people will just believe you. Editor's note, this interview has been edited for length and clarity. ESG Dive, tell me a little bit about your background and what led you to create Bridge. Daija responded, Bridge was founded in April of 2022, and somebody asked me the other day what made us launch Bridge. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe we had a crystal ball that we would probably be needed more than ever. But I will tell you the real story behind why we started. And I only found Bridge towards the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. And when I was looking into their background, they happened to have they were founded after another website talked about a Bridge 2.0 initiative. I don't actually know if Sheryl Daija's Bridge was born of that other Bridge initiative, or if it just happens to have the same name and also did a 2.0 initiative at the same exact time that Bridge was founded. Not exactly sure. Bridge is an acronym for belonging, representation, inclusion, diversity, and the G is the growth that we know and believe comes from all of that. And then the E is equity, which is our ultimate goal, to have a more equitable industry and world, which feels further away from us right now, but we'll get there. This is interesting that they changed the G to growth, because originally the G was the gap to bridge between them. It's the same crap we keep hearing constantly, because again, as you said, they are cultists. Yes. This is basically an article where I'm giving like a little bit less input than I usually do, and I just want to read through it, because it's a lot of like recap of what we already know, but it's still important to hear. And it's important to know that Sheryl Daija is now being quoted and interviewed and promoted in far more places than she was last year. This is going to start becoming far more mainstream. They're going to be using the Bridge initiatives in a lot more articles than just what we see in the Bridge Smart Brief. I, Sheryl Daija, was born in South Africa, and I lived under apartheid regime. Early on in my childhood, I understood what inequity looked like, and so that spurred my passion for social justice. I am part of a multiracial family, and I have chosen to see the world through my son's eyes, because I know that his world is different from mine. And I have just learned an incredible amount having done so. The work is very personal to me. I'm committed to building a more equitable and better world for my son and his friends and the generations to come, despite any challenges that are going to come our way. Now wait just a fucking minute! Chat, when I first started looking into Sheryl Daija, I found a very funny news story that I did read on stream. Because, you know, it's the only way to notice without actually noticing. Sheryl Daija was featured in an article about JDate, a Jewish dating website. And she talked about her experience on JDate and how she found her husband through JDate, and they've been together a very long time. So if Sheryl Daija was a Jew on JDate and she met her husband, also a Jew because he's on JDate, what does she mean that her son has a very different world outlook? Because that article didn't mention that she already had children. So, like, as I was starting to read this, I just assumed that the man she met on JDate is the man that she had children with. So, like, what exactly is going on here? The one South African that didn't learn the lesson. Oh my god. Oh wait, that goblin has children. This is the first time I've heard of her having children in general. But if she is a Jewish person and he is a Jewish person and they had a son, then that is also a Jewish person. What does she mean that her son would have a different outlook than her? Maybe she adopted. That's possible. Maybe she adopted. It's also possible that, like, she had children from, like, a prior relationship that the J-Date article never mentioned, but that still just seems really out of left field to me. J-Date man was cucked? I don't know. I don't fucking know. Maybe the J-Date man happens to be a black dude. The only black Jews I know are the black Hebrew Israelites, but, like, is that really Jewish? She's white. How did she live under apartheid? She means to say she benefited from apartheid, and also, she's not white, she's Jewish. There's Arab Jews, black Jews, even Asian and Hispanic Jews. Did you know that black Jews are required to be sterilized in Israel? There's no fucking way that's true. There's no fucking way. It's the bull's son. Thank you, Bob Davis. Schrodinger's white. Where did I finish reading? On the professional side, I am a marketer by heart. I started my career as a marketer in the health and beauty aid consumer packaged goods industry, so I got a lot of training on that side. I was then recruited into the fragrance industry. She just like me, for real. I was then recruited into the technology industry. Oh, I went after fragrance. I went into insurance. That's where we divided. I could have been a conglomerate DEI marketer just like her. I was then recruited into the technology industry, and then I found myself in this kind of weird anomaly called trade groups. I worked at the Interactive Advertising Bureau for a while. I was the general manager there, and then I worked at the Mobile Marketing Association as the chief strategy officer. We've been pulled into this political quagmire, and it's been politicized. But at the end of the day, DEI is not about politics, is another quote from Sheryl Daija. After George Floyd was murdered, Saint Floyd of the fentanyl, in his name we pray, amen. I was programming a session at an event for the Mobile Marketing Association, and I happened to get exposed to a group of chief diversity officers, just in the middle of COVID. And we would get together like every few weeks, and I realized in talking to them what a lonely road DEI leaders had. At the time, they were basically told to sit in the corner and fix it, when it obviously was not theirs to fix. So it occurred to me that if we can bring industry together to create marketing platforms like we did with digital and mobile and others, why could we not bring the industry together for more purpose-driven work to build a more inclusive industry? So Bridge was formed out of that, and we launched with a mission that is even stronger today than it was when we launched, which was to help more the narrative of DEI away from philosophy to helping companies operationalize inclusion as a business practice for growth. And this echoes exactly what she said in that very first interview we found of her on the DEI After 5 channel with Sasha Thompson. She said that DEI is not just a moral philosophy or moral imperative, It's not just a philosophy. It is something that is a moral imperative, but it is more than that. It is not just that. And we need corporations to understand that instead of siloing it away in your HR or your marketing departments, you need to operationalize inclusion as a business practice in order for your company to grow and be successful. And that language was the beginning language that I've been shrieking about for the past year and some change, that it's going to be getting rid of DEI departments. DEI officers are going to be removing their titles. I've been saying this for over a year, that they're going to be embedding DEI into the job of just everyone at the company. And lo and behold, more than a year later, that's exactly what they're doing. And other reporters are pretending that they're just finding this out for the first time. How has the environment changed around you over the past 2 years with the affirmative action decision and latest executive orders? And Sheryl said, it's interesting. We just had a board meeting in New York at the beginning of February, and right before the board meeting, we added 7 new companies to our board. One might think it was going to be the complete opposite, that we were going to have companies dropping off the board. We've not had a single company drop off our board. Quite the contrary. And I also talked about this. When I went to, I don't think it was the last Bridge meeting. I think it was maybe either the beginning of February or the last one in January. Might have been, sorry, it was the last one, the last week of January. And I had some quotes that I read off to you guys, because again, I wasn't sure of the legality of just playing it for you. But I read off some quotes, and she said this in that meeting. She said that in the meeting, that she was actually having more companies ask to become part of the board at Bridge. So while everyone around us was celebrating all of the like DEI going away and how much we're winning, I'm like, guys, yeah, the executive orders are great. Please celebrate those wins, but also pay attention to the private sector. I've been screaming about this for a year. Dear God, someone please fucking pay attention. Affirmative action was clearly academia, and it was focused on academics, but it was definitely a hint of what was to come. Every company understands that the work needs to continue because there's an inevitability to what the makeup of our country is going to look like and what communities and society looks like. But I thought this was a far-right conspiracy theory. I thought this wasn't happening. What do you mean by this? We know that Gen Z is the most diverse generation of our time. We also know that they're different. They're different consumers, and they demand different and seasoned executives that understand that. At the same time, there certainly is some risk that needs to be mitigated. Again, we have read articles that assert this multiple times. Articles that assert that Gen Z cares about the kind of societal action these companies have, that Gen Z is more likely to consume products if they're like shilled to them by content creators rather than traditional celebrities. And especially when those products are being shilled by content creators, it matters that the content creators are diverse and not just white and not just men. So what we're seeing, and what we started to see with affirmative action, was what is the ripple effect that happens from the public sector, and how does that affect the private sector? Where are the implications, and an understanding of those implications? I think the implications with affirmative action were a lot less, quite frankly, than what we're starting to see now with this full-on attack against DEI. I think what makes me really upset is like reading this article is basically a recap of everything everyone here who was watching me last year already knew a year ago. But even with that, I wish the communications people were doing a better job. And she said this in multiple of the Bridge meetings as well. Like she has been very unhappy with the state of how much reporting has been done on how DEI is going away and how companies that aren't actually getting rid of DEI are. Like, she's never mentioned Robbie Starbuck by name, but obviously all of these articles credit him with the reversal of DEI. And she's saying almost all of these articles are incorrect. There are some companies, like Meta, according to her, that aren't doing the subversive thing. They aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing to continue the work. But most of them are, and that's where a lot of the media is getting this wrong. And again, since I've been reading this stuff for over a year, I've been calling that out for exactly the same amount of time. Because even some of the companies that have been in the press and the media about pulling back significantly, I think, are adjusting and evolving the practice. Oh, she went on to literally say what I just said. I love this woman in a like rival kind of way. She's my Team Rocket. That's really what we're seeing is an evolution, which I think probably, despite this collision with politics, needed to happen anyway. That's why, when we launched, we were already encouraging companies to kind of evolve the practice so that they were looking at DEI from both a workplace and a marketplace perspective, so that it wasn't just focused on talent. Talent is ultimately foundational to marketplace impact. We're seeing companies understand that in order to go after this incredibly large buying power of Black Americans and Hispanic Americans, that they have to have cultural fluency within their teams, and they have to think about how they're developing products that are more inclusive. I think we're seeing, in some ways, what I would have expected as an adjustment. I think that there's some maybe over-ratcheting on some risk mitigation, but at the end of the day, companies understand that they're not going to be around if they don't continue to have more inclusive practices. From my perspective, DEI was never about politics. We've been pulled into this political quagmire, and it's been politicized, but at the end of the day, DEI is not about politics. The interviewer asks, could you explain the evolution we're seeing a little bit more and how companies are looking to litigation-proof some of their programs? I think we're suffering from a few things, Sheryl says. What happened after the murder of George Floyd? Ah, Saint Floyd of the fentanyl, in his name we pray, amen, was a number of things. Number one, there were these targets and quotas that were created that were unrealistic to begin with. But I think companies had good intentions. It was well-intentioned to stand with the Black community and to say, we're going to do better. That kind of easiest way to do that was, okay, we're going to have quotas. We're going to have X number of women, X number of people of color, etc., etc. And unfortunately, it coincided with companies basically putting people into DEI roles that were not skilled DEI practitioners. If you speak to DEI practitioners that were practicing even before George Floyd, they would have said quotas and targets, that's not a good idea. There's some legal risk there. That's really funny that this whole time they've been trying to say, DEI is not about hiring unqualified and unskilled people, you bigot. And even Sheryl is over here like, yeah, you know, even when companies were trying to hire the DEI practitioners, they didn't even get skilled and people who knew what they were doing as a DEI practitioner. So like they got DEI hires for the DEI positions instead of the real and true acolytes, man. No true DEI practitioners. Real DEI has never been tried, chat. Oh my god. Munya. But what ended up happening was people were being put into DEI leadership positions, and they were not DEI leaders. DEI is a skilled practice, and I think skilled practitioners understood and would not have necessarily agreed with all of these quotas that, again, I think were well-intentioned, but probably went too far. This is fucking hilarious to me, chat. Like, the entire time they're bemoaning meritocracy and bemoaning people who want skilled employees, and now they're doing the same exact thing. They're like, oh, well, you didn't hire the DEI practitioners that were actually skilled, and that's where you went wrong. You need the real DEI practitioners with the real skill set if you want to have real DEI in your company. Jesus Christ. I actually think that the CEO from Cisco, Chuck Robbins, for me, said it best. He said that what the current administration is trying to do is reduce DEI to a single issue, which is about race and gender, when DEI is a complex matrix of 150 practices. At Bridge, we've identified 80 practices that constitute DEI, so I would love to know from Robbins what the other 70 are. We need some DEI archaeologists, chat. If there's 150 practices and we only have identified 80, we have to figure out how to identify the other ones. You know, we just got to keep making this shit up as we go. I wonder how many practices there are going to be next year. DEI is a complex matrix of practices, so I think companies went a little too far in some respects with the quotas and the targets, and they probably were more high risk from a legal perspective. In order to do DEI well, or to build an inclusive brand or operationalize inclusion, you don't need quotas. You don't actually need targets. You just need to do it well. What did she mean by this? The interviewer asks, what are the dangers of companies or the administration flattening or oversimplifying DEI to focus on just issues of gender, race, or orientation? Sheryl responds, DEI is both a workplace and a marketplace practice, and by reducing it to gender and race and orientation, you're strictly thinking about it as a workplace practice and not recognizing what the opportunity is from a marketplace impact perspective. DEI is foundational for companies to create business impact. We think inclusion is as transformational, potentially, to growth as AI is. It's just a different approach. If you're doing inclusion right, then you'll be thinking about how you're putting inclusion at the center of your product development efforts, how you're putting inclusion at the center of your media strategies, your creative strategies, your communications. So you're looking at it from a much broader perspective that will allow you to authentically hit those growth markets. You have to expand your thinking about where the opportunities are that allow you to have the cultural fluency to achieve growth, going after these markets that you identify. Are we identifying these markets the same as we're identifying the matrices in DEI? What are the other practices here? They ask, what guidance would you give to CEOs at this moment? And Daija responds, their obligation is to their employees and their shareholders, not politicians. So they need to prioritize employees and shareholders. Leadership is about safeguarding people, particularly in these kinds of times. It's also ironic that she says this because wasn't it Apple that had their shareholders petition them to drop all the DEI shit, and Apple was like, no, actually. Cultural fluency, is that like media literacy? Yeah, they are evolving all of their languages. Leadership is about safeguarding people, particularly in these kinds of times. And if there is any time that DEI could rise to the occasion in support of the communities that are being directly affected by the current executive orders, it's now. Acting out of fear is not leadership. Prioritizing employees and your shareholders is leadership. Number 2, reacting to the current politics is not a business strategy, and it's certainly not a sustainable business strategy. So be careful not to get caught up in the hype. You certainly need to look at your practices and understand where your risk might be. Mitigate that risk, but pause, breathe, and be pragmatic. Number 3, figure out how you can leverage diversity, equity, and inclusion as a driver of business growth. Don't allow the administration to reduce it to a single issue, because it's not. It's okay that practices evolve over time, and diversity, equity, and inclusion should be no exception. You can evolve it in a way that aligns with your business growth, and you don't have to just throw it out. Leadership doesn't protect shit. True and real. True and real. I like how she's appearing in more articles now, because getting stuff directly from her mouth is a real fucking nice thing. Real fucking nice. I don't remember when I brought her up before, because my memory is really fucking bad, chat. But there was something that I read previously that talked about an individual named Lily Zhang. And Lily Zhang is a DEI practitioner who's been doing this for a very, very long time. And the first time I ever heard Lily Zhang's name was during the initial Gamergate. Lily Zhang was someone who posted tons of like trans ideology stuff on Twitter, and Liz Fong Jones of Attacking Kiwi Farms fame is somebody who was also involved with Lily Zhang. So the fact that Lily Zhang is now writing articles that are being promoted by Bridge, it all comes full fucking circle, chat. In the Bridge Smart Brief, the little thingy before Lily Zhang's article, which is in time, by the way, there are plenty. Zhang says, use common sense interventions for DEI. There are plenty of ways companies can legally continue to practice DEI as part of an integrated strategy to standardize their hiring, ensure broadly diverse hiring pools, and analyze corporate data to identify areas in need of improvement. Says strategist Lily Zhang, who advocates for a fair in all caps, framework of fairness, access, inclusion, and representation. There are lots of other common sense interventions like this across the workplace that we don't even need to call DEI work. This is just how to run an effective, responsible, healthy workplace that people trust and feel respected in. And this article from Lily here, a new framework for DEI. This came out on February 23rd, published by Michelle Peng. I love penguins. With escalating attacks on corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, many private sector organizations are searching for an approach that preserves effective, popular initiatives while insulating them from external attacks. For strategist Lily Zhang, the solution is not wholesale retreat, but holding DEI programs to the highest standard of effectiveness using a framework they call FAIR, which is fairness, access, inclusion, and representation. FAIR is built on 4 principles that can make DEI work effective, namely being outcome-centered, focused on systems, driven by coalitions, and communicated in win-wins, they explain. So again, don't pay attention too much to the language, right? Because they're all trying to change the acronym for DEI. They're trying to obfuscate it further and make it sound less like how politicized DEI has become. And once again, the acronym FAIR, how can you be against fairness and access and inclusion, you bigot, right? Like, these are more words that they can use to discredit you if you go against them. They contend that many programs currently being rolled back, such as participation in external surveys and public statements on a company's website, fall short of this standard. We spoke to Zhang to learn more about how these kinds of programs have failed in the past and their recommendations for designing DEI strategy that will stick going forward. Here are excerpts from our conversation, edited for length and clarity. The interviewer asked, "You have argued that much of mainstream DEI was falling short, even before this current wave of attacks. Why is that?" We already know this because Bridge has been talking about how they've been falling short for years now. But let's see what Lily Zhang says. Zhang replies, there was a study that came out showing that between 1990 and 2015, which is 25 years, the rates of anti-black hiring discrimination did not change by a single percentage point. Hey, yo, we read like 3 articles on this before. I don't know if there's any like short clips that were pulled out of my streams about this, but I remember us reading these articles and people saying how like in the past 25 years, it was obvious that DEI did not go far enough. I hope some other people remember this with me. There's a lot of similar stats on the glass ceiling for women on promotion rates being low. The bamboo ceiling for Asian people. Isn't that kind of fucking racist? Why do the Asians have to have a bamboo ceiling? What the fuck is this? What the fuck is that? Disability-related discrimination rates. By all of these measures, we've seen that workplaces haven't necessarily been making good progress. All these problems still existed, but companies tried to solve them in ways that were just as ineffective. You don't solve racism by having a book club. You solve racism by fixing your hiring process, by training your managers, by ensuring that there are consequences for harmful behavior. Harmful behavior like how Liz Fong Jones went psychotic over the fruit farmer site. And by building respectful norms in your workplace. This is what the work looks like, and companies were not investing in it. Unfortunately, even in 2025, this continues to be the case in the vast majority of workplaces. This is the big challenge that DEI practitioners have had for decades at this point. Again, there's a lot of people that want to say this shit started like in 2015 or it started like 5 years ago. No. This is patently Marxist subversion that started at a bare minimum in like the 1930s. Bare minimum back then. And you can point different peak fluctuations where they sort of went a bit more mask off and they pushed too far too fast that too many people noticed, right? You can say 2015 for that. You can say like 2020 for that. But this has been going on so much fucking longer. And it also makes me happy that they have also been saying this out loud. Because a lot of people will just call you a fucking conspiracy theorist if you say it, but it's like, I'm reading their fucking words, my guy. I don't know what you want from me. Even if backlash had not become a challenge, now not only are we navigating the backlash, we're navigating this legacy of ineffective responses to solving these deeply rooted problems. The interviewer asks, are there ways to make DEI work more impactful while shielding it against this new wave of attacks? Lily Zhang replies, I mentioned that study done on anti-black hiring discrimination. The same study found that the companies that had the least hiring discrimination all had one mundane thing in common. A centralized, standardized hiring process that used scoring rubrics and hiring panels. That made it so that there was some rigor and standardized process so that a single hiring manager could not hire someone willy-nilly because they liked the way they look. What? So if you ask me how to mitigate hiring discrimination, I'm not going to recommend you sit everyone down for 3 hours and train them on every single racial bias that exists. I'll say just standardize your hiring process. People of color or women or LGBTQ+ folks, these are not the only people that are impacted by bias. Basically, standardizing your process is going to help pretty much everyone. Excuse me. It ensures that we don't act on these biases that we might hold about who a smart person is or a skilled person is. This is the eliminating unconscious bias, where you might see someone and make like a snap unconscious decision about how competent they might be, regardless of what they say to you or what their skill set is, I suppose. There are lots of other common sense interventions like this across the workplace that we don't even need to call DEI work. This is just how to run an effective, responsible, healthy workplace that people trust and feel respected in. That's true. Why call it DEI work? That just opens you up to attacks. The interviewer asks, you focus on measuring outcomes and building accountability in your work. How do you recommend organizations set these systems up, and what should they be measuring? Lily Zhang responds, one of the things I have helped companies do for the last 8 years. By the way, Gamergate did something, chat. Did you know that? Gamergate actually did something. That's why this person was allowed to go unabated, helping companies for 8 years embed DEI practices. Yay, Gamergate, we did it. Get the bucket. We do audits and culture surveys to assess people's access to decision making, their access to opportunity, their perceptions of psychological safety or physical safety. We analyze all this data by demographics and organizational factors like level, tenure, and department. Gamergate made a lot of people famous. Gamergate made a lot of people famous, and I think that a lot of people just followed algorithms and they only really made content on things that would get picked up by the algorithm, right? And we saw that a lot this time as well, where people made like a gajillion billion Sweet Baby videos. And it's like, man, like you can reference Sweet Baby, but like I don't think there was fucking that much to talk about in regards to them, especially when Sweet Baby is part of the problem and not like the boss itself. It's just like, you can't just focus on one thing because the algorithm loves it and wants to promote it. I get it. Content creators want to make the content. They want to get paid. Bridge is not in the mainstream yet, so it's not getting picked up by the algorithm. So like, why make Bridge content if you're only going to get, you know, like 20, 30, 50,000 views and it's not going to be huge? Like, I get it from a content creation perspective, but again, this is why Gamergate fucking fell on its face. Yes, we laughed at people. Yes, everything they were trying to do was ridiculous. But while content creators were laughing and making YouTube videos, these people were embedding themselves further into companies to fuck up more games, to become journalists, to do consultancy like Lily Zhang did. Gamergate, I do believe, and this is just my opinion, was an obvious abject failure, because instead of being vigilant and following these people and paying attention and trying to stop their ideology, people just moved on to what the algorithm wanted next. Data allows us to see which problems are real, which problems do not exist, which things don't need solving, and allow us to allocate our resources to actually fix things that need fixing, and ensure everyone has good outcomes. I've worked with organizations where women have better outcomes than men. In that situation, how can we make this organization work better for people of all genders? I just don't believe you. I'm gonna press X to fucking doubt on that one, dude. I've worked in organizations where Ivy League grads ran a top clique. How can we make sure that talent, regardless of where you went to school, can shine? Also, data are the first step to accountability. If a leader says, I want to end discrimination, then of course you need to measure discrimination. You need the leader to do something about it, and then you need to measure discrimination again to see if it went down. This is the building block of any kind of effective change management, organizational intervention approach. You measure, you do your experiment, you measure again. The more data we collect, the more effectively we collect it and use it. And the better we can not only make change, but also visualize that change and hold ourselves accountable. And all of this data stuff was something that Sheryl Daija mentioned at the last Bridge meeting as well. That a lot of these companies that were aggregating this data about diversity, equity, and inclusion at companies are now not tracking this data because they are worried about that data being public information, that data being used as something in like a lawsuit against companies, that data being used by people to attack the companies. So a lot of these data aggregators have just kind of fallen off a bit. 20 pounds of discrimination. The interviewer asked, what has been the impact of recent rollbacks? It seems like there's been a mix of programs affected, from the window dressing of lunch and learns and Heritage Month messages to more concrete actions like supplier diversity pledges and diversity hiring slate policies. Zhang responds, I really appreciate you pointing out that not all rollbacks are created equal. There are some which are clearly performative, just as performative as the performative DEI efforts were. You can't just use performative 3 times in, like, less than 10 words, man. For example, you can get a perfect score on the Human Rights Campaign survey and still be a terrible workplace for LGBTQ people. Oh, fuck! Oh, it's just a signaling effort in the same way companies saying they're not doing the survey anymore doesn't tell me anything. But some folks on the right will see this as a political win. Holy fuck, we got a smoky gun, chat! This was one of the things that I was reading in those things where I was like, yeah, maybe pulling out of the Human Rights Campaign is actually doing something. But also, based on what we know on how these companies are getting rid of their DEI departments, I said pulling out of the Human Rights Campaign survey is just another way to obfuscate that they're continuing doing the work without making it public. If they're not reporting, we don't know what they're doing. And now we have Lily Zhang saying, yeah, those idiots on the right are seeing this as a political win when it actually isn't. Because it doesn't matter if you even had a perfect score on the Human Rights Campaign survey, because it could have just been performative virtue signaling. It doesn't tell you shit. Oh my God. I love how people would like to tell me I'm making assumptions when I just keep being right. I just cannot stop being fucking right, chat. Just read what these people say, and you'll know more than most YouTubers. Self-incrimination. But there are other things that are going to have real impacts. For example, the companies that are rolling back on their commitments to ensure broad representation within candidate pools before they hire. How can you ensure broad representation within a candidate pool? Is that like you have to fill a position, but like you have 7 white male candidates, 1 woman and 1 black person, and you're like, oh, well, we can't even have interviews until more diverse people attempt applying. Like, what do they mean by that? These efforts meaningfully increase the diversity of workplaces in perfectly legal ways because they're just trying to extend the talent pool rather than setting quotas. That's true. Instead of setting quotas, if you have more diverse people in the pool, you can just ignore the white men. That's so smart. That's just like what we talked about the colleges doing. These things are legal, they're effective, they're very well appreciated. I can't see any possible benefit except to signal to certain groups that you're willing to inflict harm upon marginalized communities. Or let's say you're funding a nonprofit or an institution dedicated to racial justice. It does send signals, but it also has a real tangible impact on everyone who works there. Then, more importantly, that's going to really, really hurt morale for everyone within their workplace. If these things go away, there's a very good chance the workers in those companies will feel a lower sense of belonging, lower well-being, and lower productivity. They're likely to see these workers leave because there's lots of workplaces that treat workers of all races and all genders well. So we're going to see a brain drain away from these workplaces that have signaled that they would much rather pander to authoritarians than build workplaces for everyone. First of all, I just don't believe you. Second of all, there's not going to be any brain drain of DEI hires. That's just not real. And Zhang has their own article here in the Harvard Business Review. What comes after DEI? How a new framework built around fairness, access, inclusion, and representation can succeed where DEI has failed. By Lily Zhang. Good fucking God. How can you brain drain what does not have one? True and real. Is this the same talent pool causing all the near misses at the airport? Good lord. Lily Zhang is a strategist, consultant, and author who works with leaders to build fair, accessible, inclusive, and representative organizations. They're the author of the forthcoming Fixing Fairness: 4 Tenets to Transform Diversity Backlash into Progress for All. Oh my god, this is long as fuck. Oh my god, this is long as fuck. I don't know if I want to read this one today. We might have to circle back around to this fucking Lily Zhang article. Because we've been on the DEI train for a hot fucking minute here.